Hey all, I'm Eorzean,
I'm the Neri Neri.
and today we're going to be talking about a subject that is rather near and dear to our hearts. Now, we don't necessarily have a categorization for this, is usually we're not ones to speculate willy-nilly. However, the sheer level of excitement, as some of you may have witnessed during the last live ever for this topic, has kind of warranted it, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. This is an extremely hype concept for me, and I know for Elio as well. So we thought we'd talk on it for a bit.
And if you're unaware of what we are talking about, we are talking about the new content of variant dungeons, which is a method by which they can create new dungeon content, but also facilitate a lot of lore exploration for places that we have been wanting to go to or dive into for a long time. And very specifically, the fact that the first one is still D is
Yeah, that's the second best option for me. The only thing that would have been better would be Fifth Astral Era, but still, is extremely hype.
I mean, like, and even within that, like, it would have had to have been somehow Scala for you to like that would have just
Yeah,
destroyed you.
yeah, Scala or
Um,
like one of the unknown city states. I mean, I would have hopped onto Twitch. I think if it was one of those.
hey, maybe we find the ruins beneath Sildi of an even older civilization.
That's entirely plausible.
We are very, very excited. And if you don't know why, if you don't know much about Sildi, we'll fill you in there. But I want to go over some over the subject as a whole, both with variant dungeons and sort of the historical reference points here with Sildi. Now, just to quick explain, Sildi was the sister nation to Ul'dah when their forebearer nation split in twain, Belladia. And Sildi ended up falling to basically a giant zombie outbreak that had to do with, well, there's a grand history into it. And if you haven't, you should check out our lore talk on that.
You absolutely should. But zombies happened in Sildir, and Uldar uh, essentially crushed them, and then a few centuries later built their own city, rebuilt Uldar essentially in Sildir.
Yeah, and so that's why the ruins sit underneath it. Now, if you play the game, like even if you just play MSQ, you should be relatively familiar with some of these ruins, as they are the way by which you escaped during the 2.x content patch, or even out in central Thanalin, you can bear witness. Now, Sildi has been gone for the better part of what would be what 6-ish, 7-ish centuries at this point.
But yeah, roughly
So
about that.
yeah, because the ending of the 10th century, basically.
Yeah. So not a huge, like in the grand scheme of things, not a huge time ago.
No, I mean it's within. Well, I guess technically we're in the seventh now, but it's within effectively the most recent astral era, as opposed to something like Alag.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
So variant dungeons are really interesting. I'm going to kind of just read off the slide because effectively, in some ways, that's what we know about them. But they are variable difficulty dungeons, previously introduced as Criterion dungeons. However, the Criterion dungeon moniker has not necessarily gone away. We'll touch on that a little bit. But level 90 casual play for 1 to 4 players, player parties when matched. Now that's super interesting to me because especially seeing as they're meant to be casual play, this means that they facilitates being a very lore focused content style very easily. You have no role restrictions, which means you can just kind of go in with whatever you want. Enemy strength determined by party size. Route of progress branches based on player action, which means that there's going to be a quite large sum of information to gather, and just going through once won't be all of it.
It means I'm gonna have to replay the dungeon many times.
Oh yeah, I mean, because the thing is that think about the amount of times me and you and many of our listeners, I'm sure, have played a dungeon and realized or noticed something on their like 12th run. Now you
Yeah,
get to do that for those 12 runs for 4 root branches or whatever.
yeah, absolutely. And our first dungeon, like we said, is the Sildir Subterrane. Subterrane meaning just something subterranean, something underground. So it'll be the tunnels and stuff that we find when we flee from the banquet in a 2.5.
Yeah, 2.55.
Right.
The thing that's really interesting about that is we also get the little thing about exploring the depths alongside a certain someone. Now, there are a plethora of people studying history in Thanalin specifically, who would fit that bill. But you can also imagine some sort of maybe more out there characters like Ellie from the Hildebrand questline.
It's possible. It's possible that we get like a student of Baldesion.
Yeah.
Graha or any of the other students. I could see Pippin. I could see what's her name? The leader of the church, the leader of the Order of Nalpa.
Oh, Dulala.
Yeah, Dulala. I could see it being Dulala as well that we go down there with.
I couldn't imagine Nanamo. However, Lilira I could definitely see. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
well,
Interesting.
just a thought. No, I actually think that it's much more likely to be someone who is an interesting choice who we've spent less time with because it strikes me as like too good an opportunity to dive into those characters who are existent but maybe could benefit from more screen time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this kind of stuff is perfect for that. And we've I wonder if they trialed this idea first in the temple in Stormblood, because you go through that with an archaeologist, of course.
Right, right.
In sort of a cinematic sense, the archaeologist doesn't feature into the gameplay at all. But broadly speaking, that kind of concept is sort of existent there.
Absolutely. And I think in a wider context, you think about the dungeon design even onto a Realm Reborn, but basically throughout the entirety of 14, a lot of the dungeon design has been rooted in trying to convey some piece of lore information. Not singularly, not necessarily just as primary focus, but you think about how every dungeon has basically almost universally existed to broaden the context of its surrounding environment rather than just being an isolated cool thing.
Right, exactly. Which is something that 14, I think, does very differently to WoW, for example.
Mhm. Well, and I think that that is kind of goes to show also why we end up we're getting something like Variant Dungeon. The fact that that is the effort that is put into that. And I guess actually that maybe brings up a good subject around me and you thinking that we would never get anything like this. And that's because we, or at least I, it was as much as someone who I love lore, as much as I love the topics that we're about to get to go into, it didn't make to go back in the midst of 6.0 or 7.0. Let's say we're going to Mara City. Let's just say we're going to Mara City. It doesn't matter where we're going, but let's say for instance, why would you make a dungeon of Sil D when you only have a certain number of dungeons per expansion? And you need those to tell the stories of those, like the new places you're going. So, like, I never could imagine a world in which we would be going retroactively backwards made a lot of sense
Yeah.
with the format as it existed. But now,
Now we have a wide open horizon. If you watch our videos that contain both of us, End Talkers or Law Talks, we probably especially Law Talks, we talk at length about how much we wish we could learn more about Seal D, Belladaya, the fifth Astral Era, city states, but we always say, but we're probably not going to get any more dungeons about them. But this changes everything.
the game has changed.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take one of these every patch if they're giving them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I gladly will. But here's the thing, too, is that we're getting, I believe it was, what, 3 total over the course of the Point X patches? So if
Right.
we expect 3 per patch content cycle, I don't know if we should be expecting them during expansions, who will only be able to guess during 7.0, or we'll only know once we get to 7.0. But the amount that that allows us to explore even now is going to be insane. And I really want to get to talking to some of the speculation around what those other ones could be and where we could go in the future. But let's make sure. Is there any other thing that we kind of didn't really hit on? I mean, we talked about the whys and whats of SIL-D. We kind of talked about what variant dungeons are. I guess the one thing I do want to touch on is the difference between the variant dungeons and the criterion dungeons. So effectively, they are adding what is a actual sort of normal version and a savage version of the criterion dungeon. So you have a level 90 high difficulty challenge for 4 players. Party must comprise 1 tank, 1 healer, and 2 DPS, so you can't play any job. Visually similar to variant dungeons, but overall structure, enemy strengths are entirely different. Routes predetermined, and no NPCs accompany you. So effectively, they're making a story version, a normal version, and a savage version.
Yes, and I do actually think that there might be some lore in the Criterion, probably not the Savage, but the Criterion and the Savage group together might give you a little bit of different lore than the others. Even if it's just
Mhm.
enemy ability names or the enemy choice or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's very, very possible. I'll be interested to see if only because I can imagine that's a really good place to save development cost time although I guess the fact that you have multiple routes in the one, but only no routes in the others means that unless there's like the primary route, they would have still had to have devised a new route of some kind. So you'd either be stuck recycling one of the exploration routes, or you would have to do something that's at least slightly different. So yeah.
Right. Well, the fact that it's not called Sildius Subterrane, expert and savage, the fact that it's called another Sildius Subterrane tells me that the
Mm.
layout is going to be unique. Now, I can't say that 100%, but
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. So, shall we hop into our not idle speculation? Because I think the sort of speculation we're going to be talking about is more about our wants and desires, but also about genuine, informed things that we could assume would make sense. So, I would say that this is, as much as this is basically wild speculation, I do think what we're going to be talking about next is very informed.
well, we've got our basis in the law at least, if nothing else.
Hmm. So, we have, in terms of looking at Eorzea, right? You have those places like Gelmora. If we're looking to Gridania, you have Gelmora,
Right.
and being able to explore that. Now, we already have places like Heaven, or not Heaven on High, Palace of the Dead. So there is some pre-existent exploration of that culture. However, we know from places like in the North Shroud, there's much of that civilization that is just completely unexplored.
Yeah, absolutely. There are huge amounts of ruins and of sections of Eorzean that we haven't explored. We could get a Criterion dungeon in Cartano for all we know. We could get one in um, Dravania for the ancient
Hmm.
Ishgardian civilization that was up there. Uh, really, the possibilities are endless.
You would also provide many opportunities to explore tribal groups, lands. I mean, like we already have Pagalthon as a dungeon, so it's not like we need to go there again, and Zelphatal.
But it gives us an excuse to go to Yugomuro and stuff like that.
Exactly, which we've never gotten to go to. So if you're for those of you who are unaware, basically the entire northern half of Vilbrand is just we've just never been able to go to it. Like half the island is missing from your map in terms of exploration.
Yeah, and there's this huge volcano, like absolutely titanic volcano in the center. We get a little bit close to it, kind of, in some of the regions where we go to the Cobalt mines, but really we don't actually get to the mountain. And we know that that's where the Kobold's capital is. That's where they're centered. Their society is centered.
Arguably, technically, the closest we get to is when we go to try and fight Titan. But you're underground. Like you might as well not be. You don't have no idea where you are geographically, right? Like yes, you're somewhere below the mountain and a place where the kobold are, but we have no idea how far in we go. And yeah, like you say, like outer Lenosia is still malms and malms away from anywhere near to the kobold home regions.
Right, exactly. They did kind of separate the home regions of most of the tribes, except for kind of the sylphs. But I think this is a good chance for us to go to see them. In the Sylvia subterrane, what I'm expecting to see is a lot of undead. Um,
Yeah,
probably some historical figures from Sildir that are undead, possibly the prince, the final prince of Sildir, the prince of the waters.
right.
We might see. This is how we said we weren't going to do wild speculation. Uh, we might see if Sildir was the civilization that the Golomancy of Beladiah survived in, whereas Uldar clearly, well, mostly cast it off. You still got the Goldsmith Guild, which was some, but mostly not there.
One other curiosity I have, and we've talked about this prior, is we don't have a really good sense of where the Marsaja pits are. And so I
Hmm.
wonder how much they might run cross or co-related to the Silty subterrane because of how much the subterrane is in and around Ul'dah itself, and how much the Marsaja pits seem to be implied to be resting beneath Ul'dah too.
Right. So if you look at the slides that they put up, some of them show, I believe, an area with a big sort of gate at the end of it, like a big
Hmm.
chain gate. Well, not a chain gate, like a crosshatch steel gate. That's interesting. That could be a facet of just sealing away the undead there, which was certainly something that they did. Didn't end so well for them. It could be some sewer architecture, or it could be something related to the pits, which are the most profoundly disturbing and secure prisons of Uldar.
Well, and it's worth noting that you can get into the Sildi subterrane from the Sultana's palace. So you have to imagine that there is a remarkable amount of infrastructure of Ul'dah that like actually does find its way into Sildi, rather than just those singular sites we're like very aware of out, like for instance in Central Thanolin.
Right, exactly. When you build your city on the site of another city, inevitably the two are going to intertwine, especially when the two come from a shared like architectural, cultural origin, as
Hmm.
Sildi and Ul'dah did.
Yeah, no, there's just, even if you're not a lore person, you should be excited because cool, awesome, you're getting Savage dungeon content. Don't worry about it. But if you are, and, well, and if you're not, I don't know why you're listening to us. But but if you are, this is maybe one of the biggest. Like this is probably one of the biggest things for lore since like Encyclopedia Eorzeas in some ways.
Oh yeah, I would say so. There's definitely possibility for that at least. Well, that and they're not doing this in the new expansion, but that and the stuff like Bozja and Eureka,
Right.
giving us whole zones for that sort of stuff. Um, but yeah, I'm so excited for this. The stuff that we don't know about Seal D and the stuff that we could learn about Seal D would inform our understanding of Ul'dah and of Thanalan so much if we were able to find out more about it.
Well, and so much of our suppositions around Belladia also get rooted in the ruins of Sildi and what we know of Ul'dah, to such an extent that even just further contextualization there for Sildi itself then retroactively affects our ability to contextualize some information about Belladia.
Yeah, and it is classic that a small handful of months after we record a an episode on Sildir of Law Talks, we get hit with this.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least we were informed to be ready to be like properly excited,
Yeah, definitely.
And now we can record this and we can justify maybe someday re-recording after we get the Criterion dungeon that's about revisiting Beladian ruins.
I think we can fairly securely say that we will be recording something about the Criterion Dungeon, at least.
Just do a walkthrough and just be like, just us like hyping out the whole time, just like, oh my god, it's the fruits of knowledge.
Oh
The
yeah,
grapes of knowledge.
I was sat here before we started recording, thinking about the thinking about the primal forms of the heraldry of
Yeah.
Beladiah and how they were passed down.
So I guess beyond Eorzea, though, we also have locales like around in Ilsabard and Othard too. So there's a metric crap ton to talk about that we could potentially explore there, because you think about how an entire geographic region like the Burn is a single dungeon. You can think about places like the Unpromised, the Undying, the Arras, like in northern Othard. You can think about the secret Goblin City that seems to exist somewhere in between Othard and Ilsabard, and that would be a great Criterion dungeon. You can think about what sort of you could think about, Corvos, whether we go there or not could be a great Criterion dungeon if they wanted to limit it to that scope. I don't know why they would, but they could.
Well, there's certainly potential for a Criterion Dungeon alongside the Corvus content that we are absolutely getting.
Yeah.
But more than that, stuff like well, not more than that, but alongside that, stuff like you said, the Goblin City would be awesome. Um, More Dalmasca content. Uh,
Oh yeah.
it
Something
was we've got
in Dalmasca Inferior.
right exactly. Hingashi proper.
I mean, speaking of Dalmasca Inferior in that region, it's like something in Nagsha. I mean, like, there's so many zones, or broadening our understanding of the places in Othard or in Ilsabard, especially in and around Garlemald. Imagine that we go to somewhere in Nalmask, somewhere, or we go to somewhere in Landis, or we find out about secret ruins in the central Ilsabardian mountain range that tell us a lot about the peoples there during a specific point in history.
Yeah, definitely. It gives us more chance to explore Abalatia's spine,
Oh,
and the areas north of that.
Far
Perhaps,
Reach,
yep, the Far Reach, absolutely. The Sahagin homeland at the bottom of the Ruby Deep.
the
It
Indigo
could
Deep.
Indigo Deep. Sorry, yeah. Content in the New World and Mericidia, in the small islands that are off the coast of Aldenard. There's
Yeah. We've
yeah.
got the Cialades in like the like south of Vilbrand. We have, I mean, hell, what frick it, give our first touch on the South Sea Islands as a Criterion dungeon. I don't care. I'll take.
Yeah, I could see that. Honestly, I could see that. The South Sea Islands, as we, from what we see of them, they are not hugely politically important in a broad sense, but they do seem to be. I mean, they're hugely important to the history of Mark, of Limsa Minsa, of Nim, of Uldar, Belladere and Sildir as well. You know, any nation that has Lalafels as a defining characteristic of it draws its heritage from the South Sea Isles.
Yeah, and so you're totally right. There's no way that you can discount it, and but I think you agree exactly with the sentiment that I was getting at. But at the same time, how can you justify it being a minor city? How can you justify it being a map for an expansion? And so trying to find the
Right.
proper content for it becomes difficult, and that's why maybe some of the pitches I might proffer forth for Criterion Dungeons are not perfectly fit for them. However, it's mostly just the excited idea that now there really is no region too small to not try to touch on in some way. There's too many
Hmm.
tools to be able to facilitate that.
Yeah, it was always for these more minor regions or stuff like the lost city states of the fifth. Uh, the option was always a dungeon, mostly. Maybe a raid, but honestly, not really. Um, so these Criterion dungeons and these variant dungeons provide an avenue for us to explore them without, like you said earlier, without taking up a main dungeon slot.
And so for any player, and the thing is even if lore's not your first thing, if you're a longtime player, this should be exciting because it will increase the breadth of things you're going to experience, and that is just thrilling in my mind.
Yeah, and I absolutely adored Mythic dungeons in WoW, which I've seen a lot of people compare the Savage Criterions to, and I would imagine that's a fair comparison, right? We've basically got normal heroic Mythic here.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I love that content. So
Yeah, I think it's apt. And I think the other thing I would say to it is I think an important aspect of how 14 seems to be doing it here and talking about Savage and where this might go and thoughts about this is not it's more without beyond the purview of not just this conversation, but what I feel like I'll be super comfortable saying because I think a lot of people are going to have maybe some different opinions about it. But I will say I'm not stressed by this idea of a mythic basically in 14 in how they're doing it here because I feel like its scope is so specific that it's not the downsides and
yeah, where it becomes the defined progression and stuff like that. Yeah,
right to,
I,
to not be too harsh. I feel like the downsides are less present.
I mean they announced what Sephiroth Unreal, which hype by the way. Uh, they announced the obviously we've still got Abyssos coming.
Yeah, we've
We've
got another
got
ultimate coming.
yep a new extreme trial as well. Obviously, we've got the island as relevant as that is, and then the Omicron Beast tribe. That's hype.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got plenty that, and I think our plan is to talk much more about those things when we get our 6.2 trailer to go much more
Yeah,
comprehensively over that. But it is a very exciting time. I think one thing that's always interesting is that if you are wanting like a deluge of content, 14 is not always designed for like a constant deluge, but it is a constant stream of incredibly high quality. So if you're looking
yeah,
for that, boy is it constantly exciting.
definitely. And it's almost certainly not why they named the patch this, but the name Buried Memory and then a Sealed Deer focused dungeon coming out seems too perfect to be a coincidence.
It certainly does match up. And even if it's specifically meant to be, and I think Yoshi kind of alluded to this, more referential to the MSQ,
Yeah,
I suspect that it was not something that was not thought about or oh, this works perfectly.
yeah, I agree.
I'm going to be really interested to see what 2 and 3 are and for the next variant dungeons. Not just because oh I want to see what they are, but because for instance, the difference between getting a variant dungeon that's a fourth astral era lost city that we didn't know about hidden deep in Abalathia, right? Is very different to getting something for the kobolds and not because they necessarily tell us something for sure, but it's just like, okay, are we expecting Criterion or variant dungeons to be an exploration of the past consistently, or are they an exploration of the world broadly, regardless of context? And I even after 2 or 3, we may not know that for sure, and they may switch things up over time, but it will be fascinating.
Yeah. My read on it is that I think it would be reckless to assume it's purely historical. But
Hmm.
if I was to paint my idea of it, which is not confirmed, I would say it's filling in the blanks. That's
Yeah.
what the Criterion Dungeons are doing for us. That's what I'm hoping they're doing for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Exciting times, that's for sure.
Yes, it is.
So yeah, I guess with all of that said, let's we can head on out. It's very strange doing something that's not a 1 to 3 hour long recording with you.
Yeah, right. Well, one will be coming soon, I'm sure.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. I guess for my final thoughts, I just want to say I am so excited for the future of 14 in a way that's almost humorous to me because for all that there is a fair chance that no expansion will ever quite live up to the emotions that I may have garnered from Endwalker. I am just as excited for every step of this journey, and things like Criterion Dungeons prove to me that it's not every part of the fabric of this world is ever expanding and growing in ways that excite me, especially when they're not necessarily the ways I expect, and sometimes even when they're not the ways I want. Sometimes that's I grow a lot more from being led to do content that I was initially more hesitant or reticent to do. So I'll just say that, and also, oh, he's still there! Yeah, yes.
Yes, I am so ready for this. This if I was added to the dev team, then my priorities would have been add some kind of content to illustrate this kind of history, and then my second priority would be to release more Encyclopedia Eorzeas.
So I guess then the one question is, what do we do now? Like, what's our like dearest darkest wish we don't think we're gonna get now? Like,
Oh gosh. It, it, oh wow, that's a good question.
I know, right? I've got to think about that.
Um, Lore Bibles, but like a not like an in-universe lore Bible, like a all questions answer thing. But then again, I don't actually want that because it'll get us out of a job.
You just want Oda's like notebook, just like straight up, just
Yeah,
photocopied.
give it to
Yeah,
me, not to anyone else. Give it to us.
you're just the holy prophet of Final Fantasy 14.
What about you? What's your deep dark hope now?
Oh God, what is my deep dark hope? I don't know because I guess for me, everything that revolves around my desires, right, are to explore those places on the periphery that we haven't been. And when
Yeah,
it comes to, for instance, like the clouds over Ilsabard, which I've been on record saying, as frustrated as I am that they're still there, I have reasons why I think it's okay for them to hold off until I feel like they have a narrative reason that they must show them.
right.
And to define exactly what the place beneath them looks like, which I think they're gonna do soon enough. But so like saying like the clouds over Ilsabard, those are gonna move. Those are gonna clear. I'm not worried about that. Let's say, going to Mirror City or the New World, that's gonna happen. Like I don't, like that's not even a dark desire. And with Criterion Dungeons exploring all the peripheries of different places, I guess at this point it would be to have content that uses echo visions or something of some kind to have to be able to explore historical points in history. But I also don't know that that's necessarily good for the lore or a good idea to be tinkering with time. Like now I know like
Hmm.
Echo is not time travel. It's obviously you're just bearing witness to the past. But at the same time, I think the darkest thing I could say is a more specific understanding of historical events, especially things like you look to the fourth, the first and second, and I mean as much as we know about Alag, even the third.
Yeah, I think we would have to. I think I mean I would like that type of content, to get to. For example, the kind of thing you got to think about would be to get to go and walk the streets of Amdapor in its prime, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
Fight in the War of the Magi. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see that. I think there are ways to do it, and if anyone can do it, I think it would be this dev team to do that kind of content without cheapening the law.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, I am very sympathetic to those people who like one, if you use time travel at all, you're playing with fire. And if you use time travel repeatedly, you're basically just waiting to jump the shark at that point. So like
Mm.
I am sympathetic to that as much as I am saying that these ideas interest me. So it's like to an extent I want them, but I'd rather not have them at all than have them done poorly. Just so that is emphatically clear.
Oh yeah, 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 100%.
You ready to head out then?
I am indeed,
Okay, guys. I've been Elliot Faucheron,
and I've been Neri Neri.
and you will be seeing us very, very soon, be it at End Talkers, Lore Talks, or 6.2. Cheers, guys.
Yep. Cheers. Thank you.
This content was brought to you by the Eorzean Archives. If you enjoyed this video, help us please the 12 by leaving a like and subscribing for new content every Thursday. And comment down below with any topic you'd like to see our archons cover in the future. For even more content, discussion, and exclusives, please check out our Discord and consider supporting us on Patreon.